It was March 26, 2018, a cold, windy morning on California's northern coast. A driver heading down Highway 1 near Westport glanced toward the ocean and froze. At the bottom of a 100-foot cliff, a GMC Yukon SUV was upside down among the rocks, waves crashing against its twisted frame. Inside were the bodies of 2 women and several children. At first, police thought it was a terrible accident, a tragic family trip gone wrong. But within days, investigators would uncover something far darker. A story of control, deception, and a family hiding a nightmare behind social media smiles. If you're into true crime stories where the truth hides in plain sight, hit subscribe, because this case is one of the most haunting tragedies in modern American history. The couple behind the wheel were Jennifer and Sarah Hart, a married pair from Woodland, Washington. They were well known online for their polished family posts. They called themselves the Hart Tribe. 6 adopted children, matching outfits, smiling road trips, inspirational captions about love, peace, and unity. But those bright photos hid years of abuse reports, police calls, and red flags that somehow slipped through the cracks. Let's back up. 2006 to 2008. Jennifer and Sarah Hart began adopting 6 children out of the Texas foster system: Marcus, Hannah, Devontae, Abigail, Jeremiah, and Sierra. By 2010, all 6 adoptions were finalized, and the Harts appeared to be the perfect interracial, progressive family. But behind closed doors, the truth was breaking apart. In 2008, while living in Minnesota, Sarah Hart was charged and later convicted of domestic assault after one of the children showed severe bruises on her stomach and back. She admitted she lost control while disciplining her child. The family told social workers it was a one-time incident. A year later, they packed up and left Minnesota. In 2010, the Harts settled in Oregon. Teachers began noticing strange patterns. The kids came to school starving, asking classmates for food, and were terrified of being bad. One child told a teacher, "They take food away when we're bad." Another said they were forced to lie still for hours as punishment. Oregon's Department of Human Services opened multiple neglect investigations. Still, the family avoided major consequences by moving again, this time to Woodland, Washington, in 2017. By that year, all 6 children had been pulled from school under the excuse of homeschooling. No teachers, no neighbors, no oversight, just the family and their image. If you're still watching, hit subscribe, because what happened next turned that picture-perfect facade into a national horror story. In March 2018, Washington's Child Protective Services received a new report. A neighbor had called after Hannah Hart, then 16, ran to her door at 1 a.m., bruised, barefoot, and terrified. Hannah whispered, "They beat us with belts. Please, don't tell them." The next morning, March 22, 2018, Jennifer and Sarah showed up at the neighbor's doorstep smiling, insisting there had been a misunderstanding. But the neighbor wasn't convinced. She called CPS. On Friday, March 23, a social worker went to the Hart home for a welfare check. The lights were off. No one answered the door. Inside, the family's pets had been left behind hungry, locked up, abandoned. The worker planned to return the following Monday. But by then, it was too late. Between Friday, March 23rd, and Saturday, March 24th, Jennifer and Sarah loaded all 6 kids into their GMC Yukon and fled Washington. They drove south back to Oregon. That Saturday, March 24th, surveillance footage captured them at a grocery store in Newport, Oregon. The receipts showed a disturbing detail: food for the adults, snacks, and alcohol, but almost nothing for the kids. The children trailed behind their mothers in silence, heads down, not a single smile. By Sunday, March 25th, cell tower pings tracked their SUV moving down the Oregon coast toward California. And in those final hours, the couple's phones told an even darker story. Deleted text messages from Sarah Hart's phone painted a chilling picture. She told a friend, "We're trying to hold it together, but the cracks are showing." Hours later, another message. "My wife is drinking again. I'm scared of what she'll do." That text was sent on the evening of March 25th, 2018, less than 24 hours before the Yukon went over the cliff. Monday, March 26th, 2018, 8 a.m. A driver spotted the wreckage off Highway 1 near Westport, California. The SUV was upside down on the rocks below. There were no skid marks, no brake patterns, nothing to indicate an attempt to stop. When investigators downloaded the Yukon's black box, the data confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The accelerator had been pressed to the floor 100% throttle for 5 full seconds before impact. The car had driven straight off the cliff. This was no accident. It was murder-suicide. Toxicology results deepened the horror. Jennifer Hart, who was driving, had a blood alcohol level of 0.1 above the legal limit. Sarah and all 6 children had high levels of Benadryl in their systems, enough to make them drowsy or unconscious. Investigators concluded the kids were likely asleep when they were driven to their deaths. The fall was more than 100 feet. Experts said death was instant.
New at 5, investigators have discovered skeletal remains at the California cliff a family of 6 drove off of in March. Jennifer and Sarah Hart and 4 of their children died. They had lived in Minnesota before moving west. Yesterday, authorities were alerted to a pair of jeans and tennis shoe found not far from the crash site. They say that the shoe contains skeletal remains, which they believe may be one of the 2 children not yet found.
When the coroner's report was released, the cause of death for everyone was listed as homicide and suicide. Police called it one of the most deliberate acts of family annihilation ever seen. Over the next week, rescue teams scoured the coastline. Bodies of Jennifer, Sarah, Marcus, Abigail, and Jeremiah were recovered first near the wreckage. Then came Hannah and Sierra, found washed ashore miles away. The last child, Devontae, the one 5-year-old once photographed hugging a police officer at a Ferguson protest, was missing. For weeks, his face appeared on every news broadcast. Months later, DNA confirmed that fragments of bone found near the crash site were his. All 6 children were dead. What investigators found next turned suspicion into certainty.
It's now been a year since the Hart family plunged over the cliffside off Highway 1, hundreds of miles from their Clark County home. And today at the coroner's inquest, officers described this scene with no traces of stopping at the edge as unlike anything they'd witnessed before.
I've responded to quite a few collisions on the coast area and vehicles down the cliffs, and it was very unusual to have no evidence of any kind.
The testimony included several graphic details of the conditions of each recovered body, the process of recovering them.
The vehicle got brought straight up and flipped onto its roof, so unfortunately it got more damaged, and then I saw one of the decedents that was in the driver's seat fall from the vehicle along with a bag.
Much of the day was spent with forensic pathologist Dr. Greg Pizarro, who methodically worked through the lacerations and the broken bones. He said based on his toxicology report, the driver, Jennifer Hart, had an alcohol level above the legal limit, and also confirmed several other family members had unusually high amounts of Benadryl in their system, including a toxic level for the other parent, Sarah.
It appears that it's well beyond the recommended therapeutic dose. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's fair to say.
The day concluded by beginning to document the multiple times the Harts had been reported to Child Protective Services, including in Clark County by their neighbors in the days before the family died.
At the family's home back in Washington, police uncovered journals and computer records. Search history on Jennifer's laptop included Benadryl dosage for children, no-kill shelters for dogs, how long to die from falling. On her computer, investigators found a file of quotes she loved. The last one read, "If I can't have them, no one will."
Washington, the Clark County Sheriff's Office says Child Services recently visited the family's home in Woodland because of reports the children weren't being fed. Child Protective Services opened an investigation into abuse or neglect on March 23rd and tried visiting the family just days before the crash. When the family lived in Alexandria, Minnesota, Sarah Hart pleaded guilty to charges of domestic assault in 2011 after police said she spanked her daughter hard enough to leave a bruise. But neighbors who lived by the family during that time say they remember the couple as good mothers with well-behaved children. On Thursday, a search warrant was served at the family's home. The front of the search warrant indicated that there was reason to believe a felony may have been committed. Items taken from the home included computers, credit cards, and bank statements.
Investigators right now are trying to put together a timeline and find out where the family had been driving before the crash and if they had made any stops along the way. After discovering the SUV, the sheriff's office said there were no skid marks and no brake marks at the crash site. Carla.
Just a tragic story all around. Thank you for the latest on it, Heidi.
About a week ago or so, one of the children came over and started asking for food. And it went on for a period of time until we kind of determined that he was probably reaching out. And we determined that we should call the Child Protective Services, and that's what we did on Friday.
And you said you think it was Devontae who was coming to ask for food.
Oh,
you know
it was Devontae.
Definitely.
You guys have shown us pictures, and we've talked about that one, that it was Devontae for sure.
Well, they obviously had
Yeah.
a separate lives. Their public life was presented, and they did it to us. They portray this happy little family, and yet, you know, the night before, their daughter's telling us, please, 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 begging us not to make her go back, and that they were abusing her. It's unbelievable. I mean, what you're showing me, that they were part of that, and the pictures, it was not the family we saw next door.
Yeah.
I feel like there was nobody in their court. I feel that if there was people that knew these people, how could you miss that?
After the case hit the headlines, reporters pieced together how this tragedy had been years in the making. Child welfare agencies in Texas, Minnesota, Oregon, and Washington all had received credible reports of abuse. But because the Harts kept moving, each state's system reset the clock. No one agency ever saw the full picture. A 2019 federal review concluded that systemic communication failures allowed the Harts to outrun oversight. In April 2021, Mendocino County held an official coroner's inquest. Jurors ruled the 6 children's deaths homicides and Jennifer Hart's death suicide. The sheriff called it a calculated, deliberate murder-suicide. Public outrage followed, not just for the tragedy, but for how it was allowed to happen. Critics pointed to racial bias in the adoption system, saying white savior narratives often overshadow real scrutiny of child welfare. Others blamed homeschooling loopholes, which let abusive parents isolate children from mandatory reporters. By 2023, both Oregon and Washington passed reforms. Now, open abuse investigations automatically transfer between states, closing the loophole that let the Harts slip away. The law became known informally as the Hart Law. In the years since, the biological aunt of 3 of the siblings, Priscilla Celestine, has spoken publicly. She said she had begged Texas agencies for updates but was told the files were sealed. When she learned the truth, her only words were, they were supposed to have a better life. The Hart family crash wasn't a mistake. It was the final act of control by 2 parents desperate to keep their secret from unraveling. For years, they built an illusion of love, while behind closed doors, their children lived in fear, silence, and hunger. When the image began to crumble, Jennifer and Sarah ended it their way. A tragedy born from perfectionism, pressure, and lies. Because sometimes, the most dangerous stories aren't the ones we tell online, they're the ones we hide. If you want more stories like this, real cases where image, fear, and control collide, hit subscribe now. Because next time, we're heading to Washington, D.C., where a missing child vanished in plain sight, and the trail led straight back to the people who were supposed to protect her. The haunting case of Relisha Rudd, next on Crime Case Uncovered.